Hey y'all, it's Alyssa again with somaticanatomy.com, and this week I am going to talk to you guys about bones. And talk about classifications of bones and classifications of joints. Before I do that, I realized that I have not actually been doing a lot of moving in these weekly emails, and this is the problem with traditional anatomy classes, because I'm doing all this stuff like, let's sit down and talk about classifications and things like that. No, you know what makes sense? What really makes sense, you can get it in your body, is getting off your behind and doing some moving. So that's what we're gonna do. I have no idea where my headphones are today, so I'm hoping you guys can hear and understand. Let me know if there are problems, just reply to the email. In the meantime, my lovely assistant Napoleon Bony Parts and I are gonna talk about kinds of bones. You can see Napoleon is all digging Pride Month with his flower crown and his unicorn horn. Yes. So, bones. So there are basically 4 different kinds of bones. There's long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. Long bones are longer in one direction, like humerus, radius, ulna, femur. There's only so much you guys can see from this view, but you know what I mean. Short bones, it's a similar length in all direction. People like to use the wrist bones. You can see little wrist bones. They're pretty much the same length in all direction, kind of square. Wrist bones, so the carpal bones here, or the tarsal bones in the foot, the ones I like to affectionately refer to as bags of rocks. These, however, would be long bones because they're longer in one direction. Patella, I would call that a short bone, but maybe one would put it in the sesamoid bone category. This is the trouble with anatomy, is that there's a lot of different people looking at a lot of different ways as long as people have been looking at the body. So you know what? Use your own judgment. You're smart already. You're getting smarter. You know what you're talking about. So long bones, short bones. Then we have flat bones. Those are plate-like. And what they're talking about often is the skull. So, excuse me, Bonnie, take this off a sec. So all these flat bones in the skull would be considered flat bones. Skull and face. Put this back on you, because that just looks good. You look better with something in your head. Balances out your face. Then we have the irregular bones, which are the hip bones. Let's see. It's down, here we go. That's a bit hot and fuzzy. Okay. Pardon me while I fall off my chair and show you hip bones. So the hip bones, the pelvic half is often called the innominate because and this is what I like, so it's an irregular bone, it's called the innominate because they couldn't figure out something that it looked like. Especially like wrist bones or the carpal or tarsal bones, there's like the cuboid because it's kind of squarish. There's the navicular because it kind of vaguely looks like a boat. The trapezium, the triquetrum, because triquetrum is kind of vaguely triangular, sort of. The lunate, sort of moon-shaped-ish. You have a couple of shots, you're looking at bones. Sure, that works. But no matter how many shots you take, the innominate is still going to look like basically half a pelvis and ain't nothing else it looks like. So the innominate is definitely an irregular bone. The pelvic half, also known as the innominate. The other big category of irregular bones, aka weird-ass bones, would be the vertebrae. Because the vertebrae, they just look like vertebrae. I mean, that's all they look like. You can't, well, it's kind of vertebra-shaped, which is kind of useless. Just saying. So vertebrae and pelvic halves, the innominate bone, those would be irregular bones. Flat bones would be plate-like bones of the skull and face. Short bones, they're a similar length in all direction, like the carpal bones or the tarsal bones. And long bones are longer in one direction, radius, ulna, humerus, etc. Now, when we're talking about kinds of joints, this is where it gets fun. Come on, joints are kind of interesting. So we have something like, so there are 3 different kinds of joints that we're talking about. One is the synarthrosis, syn being together like, to synthesize, to bring something together. and arthrosis being joints. So the synarthrosis is a together joint. And we're going to go back up to the skull. There you go, Bonnie. So all the sutures of the skull, they don't even move on Bonnie. And they actually do in us because the tiny, tiny, very, very microscopic movements of our skulls is what helps our cranial sacral flow happen. Our cerebrospinal fluid, thank you. If Dana is watching this, she can tell you that I always get, when I start talking about cranial sacral work, I start calling cerebrospinal fluid cranial sacral fluid. It's not. It's cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid, it's the stuff that keeps our head, our brain, and our spinal cords suspended in essentially a weightless environment. So that cerebrospinal fluid is very important. It also basically serves the same purpose as blood. It brings nutrients in and takes waste products out. So it's got to flow. And part of how it flows is these tiny little micro movements of the skull. Another way it flows is through the movements of our hips, pelvis, and lower back, but that's a different class. Really cool. Okay. Deep breaths. Okay. So, long bones, flat bones, irregular bones. Synarthrosis, the together joint, like the skull. They call it an immovable joint, but as I've just mentioned, it's not actually immovable. It's just, we don't really think about it. Things like, the skull, the teeth really shouldn't be movable, but sometimes they are, and then we have to go to the dentist. It's a thing. The amphiarthrosis, that's a limited range of movement. So like the pubic symphysis or intervertebral joints. Let's go back down to the pelvis. The pubic symphysis here, or the intervertebral joints, they move. They absolutely move. They just don't move, say, the same as the shoulder joints do. And why are the shoulder joints so free? We'll get to that in just a minute, because one other thing I want to mention is, so this is called the amphiarthrosis. It's a limited movement joint. Pubic symphysis, intervertebral joint, sacroiliac joints, sort of. Actually, the sacroiliac joints are interesting. They have a portion that is amphiarthrotic. They also have a portion that is what's called diarthrotic. Say diarthrosis is the free movement joint that we think of as the joint. So like the elbows, the wrists, the shoulders, blah, 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 blah. It has free movement, and it has a joint cavity. That's kind of more or less how you would define diarthrosis. But wait, there's more classification. So you've got, I'm going to stand up here. Thank you. Okay, here we go. So, because classifications are fun. There we go. Okay. So, when you have the diarthrosis, then there's the no-axial joint, the non-axial joint. So that has no axis of rotation. It's a non-rotatory joint, like a gliding joint that happens a lot in between the carpal bones. Speaking of carpal bones, they're bony because they don't rotate. There's no rotation that happens at these joints in the wrist. You can argue about the wrist joint, and I will in just a minute, but for the most part, the bones in between the wrist, these are straight up non-axial joints. There is no axis in there. There is no axis of rotation. So essentially, it's moving along no axes of movement. Then you have the uni or monoaxial joints, uniaxial or monoaxial joints. So that's like a hinge joint or a pivot joint. So you've got the humero-ulnar joint at the elbow here. Excited as I am about you, Bodhi. Yes, excited as I am about you. I'm still not used to having my Darwinian skeleton, but I can show you the hinge joint. So here's the humerus, here's the ulna. And you can see the ulna has this nice little cup here. So you can see this little thing here. It's not rotating. It's only going along one plane. There's one axis of motion. So from anatomical position, that would be, it's more or less in the sagittal plane. But there's only one axis. So then we've got the diaxial joints. You can see where this is going now. Diaxial joints. So first off, hinge joints, hinge joints. Everybody move your hinge joints. Hinge joints. What else hinges? Knees hinge. Yeah, there's no way I can show you mine. But trust me, when I'm picking up my knees here, they are hinging more or less. Hinge joints. Now, interestingly enough, while there is a joint in your ankle that is hinging, which is, let's see, I would probably consider that one the it's not the subtalar joint, it's the, I'm not going to name it because I know I'm not going to get it right now, but I'll go back through it. However, interestingly enough, the ulna and the radius together, and the tibia and the fibula together, these are considered amphiarthroses, not diarthroses. So the reason I'm getting confused is because the textbook was saying the tibia and the fibula down at the ankle joint are amphiarthroses, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, no, that's a diarthrosis. But I think what they mean is all the way down at the bottom of the tibia and fibula, it's still an amphiarthrosis. I will do some more research and I will let you guys know because it's a little confusing. It's reasons that textbooks have limits. Because a human body is a real living thing, and even when we're talking, you know, we're looking at pictures, we're looking at cadavers, we're talking about anatomy, there's no substitute for this anatomy book. This anatomy book. Just saying. Hashtag IJS. So, diarthrosis, uni or monoaxial joints, hinge, or pivot joints. So, we've got like one pivot. So here we've got the radiohumeral joint right here. See where it goes. Zip, 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 zip. Rotates, it pivots. Then you've got the biaxial joints, like saddle joints. Saddle joints right here at the sternoclavicular joint is a saddle joint. The obvious one, though, is your thumb. So that can go forward and back, it can go side to side, and it can make a circle because it's using those two. It's using those two axes of rotation. So you can also consider it a condylar or an ellipsoid joint. Now, I have always considered wrists and actually knees ellipsoid joints. So wrists can move side to side, and they can move forward and back. They cannot rotate. Any rotation that's going on is happening through the elbow because the forearm is just that cool. And finally, so we had non-axial joints, uni or monoaxial joints, biaxial joints, and yes, we have triaxial joints, 3 axes of motion, like, say, your ball and socket joints. So take your ball and socket joint, your hip, your shoulder. I'm going to use my shoulder because you guys can see it doing its thing. And you can move it forward and back. You can move it side to side. And you can move it around and around. So help me out, Bonnie. This is what it looks like naked. Forward and back, side to side, and around and around. So, if you haven't gotten up, let's get up and do this. So, first, non-axial joints, gliding joints, booms, or carpal joints. Just flex and move your wrists and just think about these guys in here. It's kind of hard to move non-axial joints just thinking about it because gliding joints are kind of small. So, uniaxial joints, hinge, bend your knees, bend your elbows, and hinge, and hinge, and hinge, and hinge, and hinge. Then we've got diaxial joints. So side to side, front and back, side to side. You can actually, with your knee, let's see. I really can't show you on me. I'm going to show you on Boney because I can get his knee all the way up here. So, here, Boney. This is going to work a little bit better. Okay, so we've got the obvious one, bending and straightening. However, when your knee is bent, you can rotate it. When it's straightened, you can't. Now, Boney's got a little bit more motion than most people, but that's because he's also got a lot more space between his femur and his tibia than your average human being. So, again, there's a whole mechanism on that, and it's super cool. But again, class. So the knees, it's not just forward and back and side to side. Sometimes it's forward and back and twisty, even though that's happening with the elbow. And finally, you've got the shoulder joints, and feel how there's so much more motion going on there. Lots of joints, backstroke, and swing your legs around. Swing your legs forward, back, side and side, and rotate your knee. Internal rotation, external rotation at the hip. So all of these things can happen, and now you have a physical idea of what happens when you are moving all 4 kinds of diarthrotic joints, diarthroses. Enjoy your anatomy. If you've enjoyed this, don't forget to check out our SOAS class. It's coming up online, www.somaticanatomy.com. And either way, I will see you online, because that's where all the fun stuff is happening. Enjoy your anatomy. And enjoy your skeleton, who's got some serious pride this morning.